Certainly. Let's move over to Newcastle, and we talk about St. James's Park all the time. How long until you think we'll actually have a decision on stadium redevelopment versus an actually brand new stadium? Like, when does PIF make this call?
I think it's going to be very early in the new year. That's what I'm hearing. I think they're doing some last minute re-evaluations of the studies that have been done. The chairman from of Newcastle is also the governor of the PIF. Will be the one that will make that final decision. And I think we can expect it early, probably I think towards the end of January is my guess as to when that sort of decision will be announced. There may be some arm wrestling at the moment about getting local government subsidies to help with this. And so some talk with the British government about trying to assist in that, depending on the scale of the project itself. So that's why there may be a slight delay. But it's a big decision, and it is, whether it's a new stadium or whether it's big redevelopment around St. James's. I hope it's one that will impact Newcastle as a city for the good for many years to come. That would give football and Saudi a great story to tell going forward.
And if you had to take a guess, if it was your decision, if it was happening right now, would you go redevelopment or new stadium?
I'd go for the big one. I'd go for the big redevelopment. And I think it would be a compelling story. I think it would end up with not only a great stadium that would be filled for a long, long time and impact the club and the city for many years to come, but it would also get a showpiece in the northeast and be able to attract inward investment around the city. And I think that would be a great plus for the Saudis to be able to do that and to show that to the rest of the world.
And is there a year that PIF and Newcastle want to have this all done by? I mean, I guess if it's a new stadium, we're probably looking a little further down the road than a redevelopment.
Well, no, I think potentially, I think we could be looking at 5 years, really. I think we could be looking before 2030, given the time for planning permissions, given the time that we'd have to go through construction, probably about a 3-year period. So I think we're looking at around about 2030 or maybe just before, depending on the project. But it isn't going to be a short, quick measure. You've also then got to plan in all the things about, do you have to close certain sides of the stadium during construction? Many factors, and I've been through 5 or 6 different stadium projects. I can only give my heartfelt sympathy to them for what they're having to go through right now, because I know how difficult these things are, but I'm sure they've got the right experts and they'll come to the right decisions. So I'm hoping for the very best for Newcastle as a city and as a club.
They're obviously deciding between this stadium redevelopment or a rebuild entirely. I mean, what would be the best option for the club from a financial perspective?
Well, it's a very difficult situation to unravel externally. Clearly, if you can redevelop the stadium and don't need to rebuild it entirely, that's optimal, because rebuilding a stadium these days appears almost always to cost over £1 billion.
Yeah,
and £1 billion of investment, and it's going to be a lot more than £1 billion by the time they get planning and start the process and finish it. These things now take 2 to 3 years to build. So over that period, from the time that you start getting planning all the way through, when you add in inflation and very high interest rates that we have right now, the whole project becomes enormously expensive. So if you can just redevelop, then that's great, and you'll save yourself some money. But it's not always possible to do, and Newcastle in particular have a problem in terms of where they're located. But if they were to knock down the stadium, the big question that I've got, and that we've talked about before on this channel, is where would they play?
Yeah.
If you've got a year outside in Newcastle, where do Newcastle play? Where's the nearest stadium that's got a capacity that could accommodate 40,000 even? Is it Ellen Road maybe, or Sunderland? Are Sunderland really going to let Newcastle play there? I suspect probably not. Maybe they will, but what if they don't? Well, then where do they play? There's Middlesbrough, which still quite a distance away. It's probably got a 30,000 capacity, but nowhere's got sort of 60,000.
Yeah.
Unless you start bringing the team down to Wembley to play home games, which I think would not go down well, shall we say. So rebuilding these stadiums in outside of London is a really tricky situation, just from a logistical perspective, in that season when you're you know, when you're doing the final bit of the build. So even if you can do a clever build where you build next door to it on 3 sides, and then you just need to knock through for that fourth, like Spurs did. You usually need at least 1 season to play at Wembley, unless you're completely moving the stadium to a different part of town, which, you know, people seem to be reluctant to do. And it's all the same issue that United have got. You know, where are United going to go if they want to rebuild? Manchester United, if they want to rebuild their stadium, it's very unlikely City are going to want to host them any more than Sunderland are going to want to host Newcastle. So I don't know. These are very tricky situations to deal with. Extremely expensive. Very, very hard to see how people get a return on capital in terms of spending that amount of money. So yeah, all big challenges.